I was standing at my kitchen counter, rinsing a coffee cup, when my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder I hadn't noticed. The morning sunlight hit the tiles just right, warm but soft. The message itself was simple, but it carried a weight I didn't yet understand. Later that evening, I found myself in the glass and gold ballroom of the Lancaster Infrastructure Gala. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and roses, the clink of silverware and hushed conversation floating between tables. About 300 guests moved in careful arcs, all orbiting a single family name. I was walking toward the reserved VIP section when someone stepped into my path. "Your seating is reserved," she said, her voice polite but firm. "I know," I replied evenly. My guest badge and jacket didn't matter. I wasn't there to impress anyone. She smiled thinly, lifted a tray with a glass of red wine, and tipped it just enough so that the liquid streamed across the front of my blouse. It was deliberate, measured, not an accident, not anger. The room hesitated. A few gasps, a laugh that came too early. Phones glanced down. Nobody moved. I stayed still. I let the moment exist as it was. The stain spread through the silk of my shirt, and I realized the cameras in the room were quietly capturing everything. I didn't think about revenge. I didn't think about humiliation. I thought about documentation. By the time Grant Lancaster arrived, smiling at first until his eyes caught my jacket, the moment had already settled. "What happened here?" he asked. "Hospitality," I said calmly. And I wondered, in the quiet of that gilded room, how a stranger is treated in public versus how capital is measured in private. I knew one detail that night would matter later, whether anyone would see what actually just happened. Then I waited. By the time I left the gala, the wine had dried into a darker shade against the silk of my blouse. The conversation around me had already resumed, as if the moment had never existed. Voices murmured, chairs shifted, footsteps carried people elsewhere. I didn't tidy my shirt, I didn't apologize, I didn't explain. The room had recorded the event, and that was enough. I walked through the side corridor, the faint hum of conversation fading behind me. The carpet underfoot was soft, muted. Light from sconces reflected off polished walls. My phone buzzed quietly in my pocket. Daniel Reeves, the incoming CEO, had sent a message. "Sorry about earlier. That wasn't ideal." I watched the typing indicator blink and disappear twice before he finally sent it. I replied with 2 words. Acknowledged. Data. Not emotion, not anger, just observation. The next morning, I arrived early at the boardroom. Red indicator lights glowed softly across 3 cameras, streaming internally and to investor archives. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and paper. Grant Lancaster stood at the head of the table, posture carefully controlled, tone measured. "Today marks a historic transition," he began. Words like disciplined growth and strategic alignment floated in the room. I took my seat without interrupting. I listened, then I spoke. "We need to address last night." A subtle shift moved across the room, just enough to make people adjust their chairs or glance down. Grant didn't look at me immediately. "A social misunderstanding," he said, adjusting his cuff. Paul, the CFO, lowered his eyes to the binder before him. Daniel leaned slightly forward, voice careful. "Is this material to funding?" Grant answered first. "No." I didn't correct him. Not yet. A director 2 seats down flipped open the agreement binder, fingers pausing deliberately. "Section 14.2, he read aloud. "Reputational conduct during negotiation or closing that materially impacts standing may trigger capital withdrawal." Pages rustled softly, the room contracting half a degree. Grant gave a short, dry laugh. "Boilerplate," he said. Paul added quietly, "It was revised at their request." Silence followed. Several heads turned toward me. I didn't move. I didn't clarify. I didn't confirm. The room was learning in layers. A single moment, a single action, had quietly rearranged assumptions about authority, and nobody yet fully understood. Then Daniel asked again, quietly, precisely, "Marcus, what exactly is your role in final authorization?" Grant answered on my behalf. "She's representing the capital partner." The words hung between us. I let them sit for a beat before speaking. "I don't represent the capital partner. I am the managing partner authorized to release the entire commitment." The room shifted. Not visibly, not dramatically, but the change was clear. Paul closed his binder, slow, deliberate. The cameras still recorded. The information was out. Authority had quietly moved, even before a single capital decision had been made. I put my phone face down on the table. Then I waited. The room stayed quiet, though the hum of monitors and indicator lights made a soft background. Grant leaned back slightly, adjusting his posture, as if repetition of his words could restore what had already shifted. He hadn't realized the depth of the change yet. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I didn't speak louder. I let the facts, the agreements, and the systems carry authority. Paul's phone lit up briefly. He glanced down at pre-market indicators, subtle movements already reflecting the early chatter from last night. The markets are sensitive to culture, I thought, more than most executives realize. I didn't need to point it out. I only needed to watch. Step 1, observe. Step 2, document. Step 3, enforce if necessary. I checked my phone once more. Every message, every confirmation, every acknowledgement had been logged. Section 14.2 was clear. No emotion required, no personal vendetta, just precise conditions, documented conduct, material impact, immediate withdrawal rights. Daniel, sitting across from me, shifted slightly. "Tell me why I should believe this won't happen again," he said quietly. His tone was measured, not confrontational. I didn't respond immediately. I waited. The silence itself was information. Grant tried again. "We are not destabilizing a $2.4 billion partnership over something trivial," he said. Trivial? I let the word linger in the air. No one corrected him. No one questioned him aloud. But the room had already calculated differently. I placed my phone face up, in clear sight, not as a threat, not as intimidation, just clarity. The cameras were live, the internal stream active, every angle recorded. I had not yet called, not yet sent formal notice, but the potential was understood. The primary trench could be frozen, capital could be held, permissions could be denied, all without a single raised voice. Daniel's eyes found mine briefly. The question was simple. Would the room act before it had to? I didn't answer. The answer would reveal itself. Grant leaned forward, seeking control, trying to normalize the situation. "This is overblown," he said, confidence faltering just slightly. I didn't acknowledge him. I didn't contradict him. I let procedure do the work. Paul's fingers hovered over his phone again. Each vibration, each alert carried information before it carried noise. The primary trench, the financial channel, the sequence of authorizations, all were contingent. I had not yet activated, but the leverage was visible to anyone paying attention. The room inhaled. The silent recalibration was underway. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The cameras recorded, the indicators blinked, the pre-market chatter adjusted, and I waited calmly as all the pieces settled into their proper positions. Then I reached for my phone. I picked up my phone slowly, fingers resting on the edges. No one in the room moved. The air had grown heavier, not from tension, but from attention. Everyone knew something was about to happen. Not chaos, not spectacle, just the careful, inevitable application of rules. I tapped the contact for our legal operations. Formal notice drafted pending immediate effect. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't speak to anyone else. Step 1 had been observation. Step 2 had been documentation. Step 3, activation, was deliberate. I pressed send. The quiet confirmation came back within moments. Paul's posture shifted before anyone else reacted. He knew what those words meant operationally. A single sentence. Activate Section 14.2. That was all it took. The primary trench was no longer accessible. Capital commitment was suspended pending review. Immediate, precise, procedural. Grant's laugh was short, disbelieving. "You're posturing," he said. I didn't meet his eyes. "I don't posture," I replied. "I document." The market never waits for emotion. Indicators moved instantly. Pre-market activity reflected the suspension. Phones vibrated across the table. 1, 2, 3, nearly all. Investors, legal teams, and assistants reached for updates simultaneously. No one needed to interpret why. The clause had been activated. Authority had shifted quietly, but completely. I glanced at Daniel. He exhaled softly, understanding without needing explanation. Across the table, Grant still believed he could contain this, that leadership lived only at the head of the table. But leverage had already moved, not through shouting, not through confrontation, but through procedure, clarity, and timing. Step 4, verification. I confirmed receipt of the operational notice with the General Counsel. Step 5, observation. I watched indicators, phone alerts, and board members' subtle adjustments. Step 6, wait. Silence was now a tool. The room inhaled collectively, realizing consequences were real. Grant tried again, voice quieter this time. "We are not issuing a public apology. We can clarify intent." He still focused on motive. I didn't respond. Impact, not intent, was the trigger. Each phone vibration, each alert on the screen, each glance around the table confirmed the structural shift. The capital was gone. The market reacted instantly. Authority had been recalibrated without theatrics. Every step had been procedural. Every outcome predictable. I did not celebrate. I simply observed, as I always did. Then I waited, letting the room process what had already happened. The next step, the board's response, the market's calculation, it would all follow in its own time. Grant finally leaned forward, voice calm but edged with tension. "There's nothing to apologize for. The footage can be contextualized. We can clarify intent." I didn't respond. Intent had never been part of the clause. The law of the agreement was clear. Documented conduct, material impact, immediate withdrawal. That was all that mattered. The cameras were still recording. The room held its collective breath in silence. Daniel, careful and precise, broke it. "Marcus, why did you act?" His voice was steady, controlled, not confrontational, but probing. "I didn't act emotionally," I said evenly. "I measured risk, documented it, and executed procedure. That's all." Grant's posture shifted, a subtle tightening of shoulders. He looked at me, expecting resistance, an argument, maybe concession. None came. He spoke again, quieter, trying a different angle. This is panic. You've destabilized confidence. No, I said. The market adjusted to measured risk. Confidence recalibrates when authority is misaligned. That's what you observed last night and this morning. Paul's phone buzzed. One vibration contained. He glanced down, confirming what had already happened. Then a second, longer vibration. The withdrawal notice executed. The words seemed to drain color from faces across the table, though nobody raised a voice. The capital was no longer committed. Grant opened his mouth, paused, then closed it. He realized authority had moved, not through spectacle or confrontation, but through clarity and procedure. Daniel's gaze met mine briefly. I see now, he said softly. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The board members were recalculating. Votes would shift. Decisions would follow. The cameras captured it all. The quiet gravity of structure had replaced the illusion of control. One director finally spoke. We need executive session. Grant's jaw tightened. I am the chair, he said. I didn't respond, not verbally. The procedural reality had already taken hold. Silence spoke louder than words. The cameras continued to run. Authority had transferred without shouting, without chaos, simply because the systems and agreements in place had been honored. Phones vibrated again. Alerts pinged. Investors were calling. Legal teams were noting. Every movement, every microsecond was measurable, precise, unavoidable. The lesson was clear. Consequence doesn't need emotion. It needs clarity, verification, and execution. Then I waited. By late morning, the boardroom had quieted again, though the monitors and indicator lights continued their soft, constant hum. Grant remained seated, scanning the table, searching for alignment that wasn't coming. The capital was gone. The market was down, moving in measurable increments. Every phone vibration, every alert confirmed what had already happened. No shouting, no dramatics, just consequence. Paul's eyes were fixed on his notes, though his fingers hovered above his phone. Daniel leaned slightly forward, careful. The conditions of the clause were met, he said, calm, almost factual. Not a judgment, just data. Grant's mouth opened, then closed. He realized fully that authority had moved without resistance. The primary trench was suspended. Investor relations were calling. Legal teams were drafting confirmations. The numbers didn't lie. The market had responded instantly. I didn't celebrate. There was no satisfaction in structural correction, only the recognition of necessity. The clause hadn't punished insult. It had enforced structure. Capital had moved where it belonged, aligned with accountability, not personality, not assumption. The board reconvened slowly. The lead independent director requested an extraordinary session. The cameras remained on. No one reached to turn them off. Motion was introduced. Administrative leave for the board chair pending governance review. Votes were counted carefully. Narrow but conclusive. Authority narrowed, then snapped. The market reflected it immediately. Double-digit declines, pre-market adjustments, and institutional recalibrations. Later, I reviewed the alerts and confirmations. Every phone, every email, every internal log reflected the same sequence. The decision, the response, the shift. It was all procedural, documented, and measurable. No theatrics, no spectacle, just the quiet application of rules, numbers, and verification. By mid-afternoon, the market had stabilized enough to reflect that the company would survive, but leverage had shifted. Authority had been recalibrated. The board had acted according to procedure. Investors had responded according to predictability. I leaned back, observed, then put my notes in order. Everything that needed action had been executed. Everything else was now outside my control. Then I waited, quietly, for the next steps to emerge. That evening, I returned to my apartment. The city was quiet, the kind of calm that settles in layers when the day's noise finally fades. I put my phone face down on the counter, rinsed a cup of tea, and watched the steam rise. Everything that had happened was documented, archived, and measured. I didn't replay it. I didn't dwell. The sequence was complete. I folded my notes, organized my desk, and made a list for tomorrow. Small routines grounded me. A window opened to let in fresh air. A kettle warmed for another cup. The soft hum of the city outside. Everything was ordinary, familiar. Control, once exercised, allowed space for calm. 3 weeks later, Daniel requested a meeting. No cameras, no assistants, just a quiet conference room overlooking the river, moving steadily, deliberately. Grant arrived alone, without counsel. He didn't sit at the head of the table. That detail didn't escape me. You could have warned me, he said. I did, I replied calmly. He exhaled through his nose at the memory of that glass. That was a social error, not structural. I disagree, I said. It revealed structural risk. The cost was predictable. He considered it quietly, not defeated, not combative, recalibrated. Authority had been restored to its proper measure, consequences accounted for, leverage aligned. Arrogance doesn't vanish when challenged. It either restructures or it is removed. He understood that now. The lesson had settled into routine. Nothing remained dramatic, only consequence. The board had acted, the market had moved, leverage had shifted. I brewed my tea, watched the steam rise, and felt the quiet rhythm of control return. And I knew this wasn't the last time a similar miscalculation would appear. Another person, another misstep, another predictable risk. My role would be the same: measure, document, enforce, quietly, deliberately. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more. Comment below with the city you're watching from and what time it is. Coming next, we'll share 2 more stories of unexpected moments with serious consequences. One involving a corporate gala, the other a seemingly small decision that changed everything.